welcome to another video. Today I want to talk with you about gradients and the different gradient tools we have in Photoshop. The photo is from me, and now let's start. We have the gradient tool here, and we have a gradient adjustment layer and a gradient map, and I will explain you what is the difference. So first let's start with the gradient tool. Open the gradient tool and you will see here on top you have this bar here. Click on it and the gradient editor will open. So if we use one of the presets here, let's click on it and press OK. You have this different options here, how your gradient should look like, and you can have a look here. Most of the time I think we will use the linear gradient or the reflected gradient. I think I will use the linear gradient, and you can change the blend mode, let's say to overlay, and then just click somewhere in your photo and drag down or up or left or right, and so you have your gradient here. So what's now if you don't like this overlay? You can't change it. So let's try. Nothing will happen, because what we did is we applied the gradient directly on our background photo. So this is not a good idea because we can't change anything. Also, if we want to use another gradient, nothing will happen. So let's go back. I go to my history and go back to the beginning, and first thing we have learned, we need a new layer. Then again go to your gradient tool and click on the bar, and your gradient editor will open. So I like this photographic toning. These are the presets here and I like them. So of course you have some more and you can choose whatever you want. Let's again apply a gradient. And we change the blend mode to normal this time, and let's drag it from left to right. Okay, and now we can change the blend mode here at our layers panel, and let's change it to overlay. And this is again something you need to try what looks best. So I like the multiply for the moment, and you can see you can change the blend mode at any time, but you can't change the direction, or you can't change the color of this gradient. So this doesn't give us much possibilities to change something. What we can do with the gradient tool is we can make a vignette. This is very easy. Click the bar here, and then I choose only the first preset because I only need 2 stops. If you have this one, you can delete all the stops. Just click one stop, hold the mouse and drag outside the window, and you can delete stops. Okay, so now at this slider here, the stops at the bottom are for the colors, and the stops on the top are for the opacity. So if you want to make a vignette, we need a first stop in black. It's already black, and we need this stop here transparent. To get it transparent, just delete the stop, click with the mouse and drag it outside your window, and it's gone. And then click on this stop here for the opacity and make it 0 and press OK. And now what is important, your background photo is still active. Press Q on your keyboard and your layer will be red. And now we start to make our vignette. So you can see it's not very, it's not a good vignette because we have this reflected gradient checked. So I will go back and let's change this. I go to the point on the enter quick mask and now I change it to linear gradient, and again let's make our gradient, our vignette. Just click and drag. So now we have our vignette. Press again Q on your keyboard and you can see you have the selection here. Now we make a new layer and then we change our foreground color to black, but you can of course use other colors. And then we go to our paint bucket tool and click. And what happened? The selection is black and we want to have the opposite. We want to have black outside of our selection. So again we go back, and what we have to do is we need to inverse our selection, Control Shift I, and then go again to your new layer. Black is still foreground color, the paint bucket tool is still selected, and if you click now you have your vignette. Now press Ctrl or Command D to deselect, and now you can change the opacity. If you did a color vignette, you can change the blend mode, but with black it makes no sense. And so if you want to make a vignette, you can use this gradient tool here. Now let's go to the adjustment layer gradient. Again, I have my gradient fill window here, and the gradient, I have the style. I can choose linear, radial, angle, and I can change the angle and the scale. Can see the scale. Okay, let's make it linear. And now if I click on this bar here, I have again my gradient editor and I can use one of the presets. Okay, and click OK, and you can see now my photo is covered with the gradient, so I need to change the blend mode here. Again, try what blend mode you like most. And the benefit of this gradient, of course, it's you can always change anything. Just double click here on this layer thumbnail, the gradient fill window opens, click on your gradient, and you can change the gradient, the color at any time. You can change the style. You can change the angle, so you are totally free in editing your gradient. Okay, and you can't do this with the gradient tool. So this is of course better to use a gradient adjustment layer than the gradient tool if you want to apply a gradient for your photo to edit the colors or give it a color tint or whatever you want to do. So now we go to the gradient map. If you apply the gradient map adjustment layer, go to the properties, click on this bar here And again, you have your gradient editor. It's always the same. You have your presets. Click this gear icon here. You can choose other presets, but as I told you, I like those photography presets, and we will make our own now, of course. So at the gradient maps, it's different. The gradient maps interact with shadows and highlights. So I prepared this document for you so that you can understand how the gradient maps works. So I apply a gradient map, and as you can see, I have the different tones of gray here. So you can see now here we have the brightness 100, here 25, 15, 75, and so on. Now we apply our gradient map. And let's open it, click on the bar, and now let's start. The sliders here, the left one is for the shadows and the right one is for the highlights. This means if I click here, I say to Photoshop, the shadows are black, but let's give it a color. The shadows should be this dark purple. Okay, now I can make another stop. Just click here on this slider and you have another stop. Click the stop and type in 25%. So this means where the brightness is 25%, you say to Photoshop, I want this green. And you can see the 25% area here is green. And then the transmission, the gradient starts to the white. And here between these two stops from purple to green, you have the transmission, sorry. And now we can make another stop. Click the stop and let's say 50%, which means brightness, where the brightness is 50% or less, I want to have this brown. And my 50% is brown. Another stop. And now 75%, I say to Photoshop, where the brightness is 75%, I want to have the color yellow. So whereas 75% brightness or less, I want to have the color yellow. And between the two stops from brown to yellow, you have the transmission again. And you have these tiny midpoints. You can also change the transmission. And let's make the last stop and say at 80% brightness, I want to have this dark red or whatever. And at 100%, I want to have this red. Okay? And as you can see, you have now first stop at 0% brightness. This is this area here. We have purple, right? At this point, at 75% brightness, which is here, we have green, and so on. I think you understand this now. But in real, if we have a real photo with colors, I think we don't make this with the location. We just move the sliders, because I think in a color photo we don't see where is 25% brightness. We only can see shadows and highlights, but we don't know the exact percent of the brightness. But this is just that you understand what Photoshop will do here. Okay, then let's go back to our photo, and we already applied the gradient map. Just double click on this ball here and then on the bar, and we're again at our gradient editor. So now let's say we want our shadows. I told you the left slider is for the shadows and the right slider is for the highlights. So we can say the shadows we want to have in, and don't make the shadows in a bright color. It's always better you stay in the darker area of the colors. Let's say we give it this dark purple tone, and let's give the highlights, for example, a light yellow tone, and click OK. And we can now change our blend mode to overlay. I think overlay it's fine. Let's see, before and after. If you're not happy, again click here in this ball, then go to your gradient editor and let's use a preset with multiple stops here. If you don't like a stop, just click the stop, hold the left mouse and drag it outside. And if you want to change the color, click the stop and change the color to whatever you want. Again here, if you don't like the stop, click it, drag it outside, and let's change the color here. And of course you can move the colors, the stops here and this little mid points. So okay, click OK, and we can change the blend mode, soft light. Yeah, I think you get an idea what the different gradients can do. The gradient map interacts with shadows and highlights, and the gradient tool is very limited to edit after, but you can use it to make some vignettes. And the gradient here is better than the gradient tool because you have again more possibilities to change your settings after, and you can always come back and change the colors, the blend modes. And I hope you get an idea and a little bit of inspiration, and I hope you will work with the gradients. And I would like to see your creations in our Artology Facebook group. Thanks for watching and see you. Bye.